Good evening and welcome to a special edition of PARL Today. Justice for Breonna Taylor. Oh, we want to talk about justice and want to hear directly from you. So if you can fill in the comments, ask your questions, express your feelings. But this is PARL Today with Edward Woods III, Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Director for the Lake Region Conference of Seventh-day Adventists and Chairman of the tongue-tied, Chairman of the Conscience and Justice Council. Speaking of the Conscience and Justice Council, our virtual convocation, our virtual convention take place tomorrow at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. It's still not too late to register for free at www. Write it down. They say if you write it down, it's great for your memory. www.cjcouncil.org. I repeat, www.cjcouncil.org. Council, CJCOUNCIL. Yesterday, the verdict came down with regards to Breonna Taylor and with regards to justice. There's mixed emotions all around the globe. Protests are breaking out. And once again, we do not advocate for rioting. We do not advocating for looting, and we do not advocate for vengeance. If you're going to protest, you protest peacefully with the mind of Christ. Once again, if you're going to protest, you protest peacefully with the mind of Christ. We have an all-star lineup gathered together at the last minute, but praise God for this group. All the way from Philadelphia, PA, is Pastor Sherry Hall, the associate pastor of the North Philadelphia Seventh-day Adventist Church. Pastor Hall, welcome to the broadcast. Good to have you. All the way from the windy city of Chicago, Illinois, the youth and young adult coordinator for the Lake Region Conference, Zakia Jarrett. Zakia, welcome to the broadcast. We're happy to have you here. All right. And all the way from the city that never sleeps, the ball drop itself, an educator, a professor in her own right from the Mount Vernon Seventh-day Adventist Church in the Northeastern Conference, Dr. S. Lanice Wallace. Welcome to the broadcast. Happy to have you. And yes, we're happy to have all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, an attorney, a civil rights attorney, one who is not afraid to talk about the law, even though you may not like what he has to say. He knows that the law is the law. So don't beat him up, but listen to his brilliance. Isaiah Delamar Esquire, welcome to the broadcast. Glad to have you. And last but not least, from the heart, the pulse of Louisville, Kentucky, the bishop in his own right, from the magazine Seventh-day Adventist Church in Louisville, Kentucky. Let's give it up for Bishop G.E. Thornton. Welcome, Bishop, to the broadcast. God bless each and every one of you. Bishop, you're at the ground level. Can you please share with us what is going on in Louisville in light of the verdict regarding Breonna Taylor? Need you to come off mute, Bishop.
Sorry about that. As we are here in Louisville, Kentucky, as you know, we're the second largest city in the state of Kentucky, the second largest. We're under curfew right now. We've been under curfew for the last 2 days, 9 o'clock. In fact, the alarm just went off just a few minutes ago, asking everyone to be off of the street. There's still a lot of unrest, a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, a lot of people are just angry as to the outcome. As you know, in my church here in in Magazine Street Church, we have a city council member, Keisha Dorsey, who served as the councilwoman for one of the area, District 3. We're in District 4. And so there's a lot of pain. Um, I want to applaud our young people, our young adults and young people, because they are not they're not going away silent, and they are making their voices heard because of the injustice, the travesty of justice. And of course, the attorney with us tonight can speak to that issue, that how they came with that verdict and decision. I knew a couple of days before, as the Mayor Fisher was setting up blockades and barriers and closing down downtown and board, that was signaling that the decision was not going to be a pleasant one or pleasant outcome. And so they were stoking the fires already. And so a lot of the young people and people from around the country came into Louisville to begin to march and protest because, quite frankly, it really, for Breonna Taylor's family, her life, that decision, even though they gave them 12 million does not nullify the fact that we want justice. And today, Sherry Hall, Pastor Hall, I wrote, out of my anxiety, I wrote an open letter to the mayor, to the city council, and to the Louisville Metropolitan Police Department, expressing my frustration because I just could not sit back and not do anything. And so I wrote an open letter, will be published tomorrow, and it will go to all the city officials and so forth. So pray for the city of Louisville. We got some difficult days ahead, as Martin King used to say. But I believe that we will keep our foot on the gas pedal, and we will not let up off the brakes until justice is served.
Bishop Soren, since you are there for our listening audience, can you just give people a background for the story? So many times we assume everyone knows what we're talking about and they don't have it. And it's just good to have the benefit of some boots on the ground. So if you could just kind of give us a timeline as to where we are today.
Well, you know, this thing started back in March the 13th, 2020. Breonna Taylor was in her home with her fiance, with her boyfriend, and of course the police officer, law enforcement were looking for a certain person. They went to the wrong house. I mean, the person who they were looking for were not where Breonna Taylor lived, and as you know, they went in without notice, knocking on the door and bust in. And in Kentucky, you have the right to bear arms and carry a weapon and so forth. And so when they didn't identify themselves, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, Mr. Walker, began to fire his pistol. And upon firing his pistol, of course, 32 rounds, and we now know this after the grand jury indictment, 32 rounds was plummeted into that apartment. And out of the 32, 8 shots hit Breonna Taylor and killing her. And then the decision on Wednesday by the Attorney General, AG Attorney General Daniel Cameron, the grand jury came out with the decision that they charged one officer of the 3 officers with blatant endangerment. He was shooting at the other apartment. He shot 10 rounds, not hitting anyone, but yet he was charged. And then now Breonna Taylor, who was 32 rounds was shot by the other 2 officers, but none of them were charged because, according to the grand jury investigation, that they were defending themselves. It doesn't make sense. And so here we are, 197 days of protesting here in Louisville to have justice for Breonna Taylor. Now, last week, a week or so ago, the city acknowledged their wrongdoing by giving them $12 million in a settlement to the Breonna Taylor's family. But no money can bring back the value of a life. And so I guess they thought that that was going to be like hush money. Come on, say amen, somebody, and keep them quiet. But people were still saying, even though, yeah, rightly so, that they were able to get 12 million, we still want justice to be served. And when we were hoping that it would be a better outcome, but I knew when they started putting up down, closing up the federal building, closing up shop, the mayor had more concern about protecting his precious building downtown than the value of life that was lost in Breonna Taylor. And so here we are, 197 days, and we still have not gotten justice. But it's not over. And I will say to you, Dr. Woods, I'm not a proponent of violence. As back in my day, I'm not a proponent of vengeance. Vengeance is mine, said the Lord. But I'm telling you that people will not let this go away. And I thank God that this is a national, this has made national attention across the board. And the other thing I want to share, 2 police were shot last night. Now, my mama said, you can't believe everything you hear and read in the news. Come on, say amen, somebody. Now, even though they said 2 officers were shot, I believe, and this is just my commentary, I believe that they're trying to stoke the narrative of Donald Trump, law and order president. Now, they say the 2 officers have recovered, but they sure were so nice about them being shot. I just don't believe that it really occurred. Or maybe they accidentally shot themselves. I don't know. You just don't know in this strange land in which we live in. People will do things to promote their agenda and their propaganda. Now, I'm not suggesting, and I hope if they were shot that they're doing recovering and getting along. But people are using this now to say, see what I tell you? That these democratic cities and states, they need to be held in check. And Donald Trump is using it. In fact, he commended the Attorney General and said what a fine person he is and that he's going to be a rising star. By the way, most of you don't know that the Attorney General is married to Mitch McConnell's granddaughter. I don't hear nobody. And so you got politics all wrapped up in this. That's why justice can't take place, because it's all wrapped up. And he swore to the people that he's not biased, that he is objective. He can't be. He can't be. And the grand jury, Mr. Brother Attorney, you know, a grand jury, the only person in that grand jury is the attorney, and he pretty much swayed the grand jury in which way they should go. And so that's where we are. I'm glad to be on this panel tonight, but I'm still a little hot. I'm still a little warm behind all of this. So I'm just trying to take my medication because I have a pre-existing existence, meaning that I can get mad at a moment's notice. But it's good to be here tonight.
A pre-existing condition.
Yeah, I'm mad.
You can get mad at a moment's notice. What I'm hearing is that there might not be a relationship after all. I know there was a niece and a doc, and then there was a granddaughter, and it says he's not married to Mitch McConnell's granddaughter, is what they're saying. That's just simply not true. But that did come out there, and you know, every now and then for truth in advertising, try to make sure we get the snoops right.
Yeah.
But it's my understanding that he's definitely not married to the granddaughter.
Well, let's put it this way for disclaimer's sake. He's engaged.
Oh, he's married, but it's just not the granddaughter.
Okay.
But hey, you never know what the connections are, and I get that. I understand what you're saying. But the thing that I think keeps coming up is, you know, I'm in Lake Union. You're in Southern Union.
Right.
I'm in the bedrock of Adventism. You're in the bedrock of the civil rights movement.
Of the South.
What in the world is happening where we just can't get it together to have a whole new initiative that says, you know, Black Lives Matter doesn't have to be done while the church rises up in Lake Union. The church rises up in Southern Union. Why can't we be the head and not the tail, whether it's the TAIL or the TALE?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, what's going on? I mean, you're a veteran of the civil rights movement. Now you're going through the Black Lives Matter movement. What is it, Pastor? What is it? where we're afraid to speak truth to power and rise up and say the Bible's our only creed, and I'd rather serve Jesus than follow the dictates of man, like Peter and John said in Acts. What is happening to the institution of the church where it's not rising up? I don't
Yeah.
get it.
Well, Magazine Street is a historical church.
That's right.
1890, and right after Reconstruction and all of that, and the civil rights and all civil war. Pardon me. Racism, as you know, has been with us for a long time, and systemic racism. I think the church speaks to some of the issues, but the church is very institutionalized, and they preserve the status quo. So they're not going to rock the boat too much. But I think we now seeing a generation rising up. This new generation is rising up. They're not having it. They're not singing Kumbaya. They're not having it. And I'm happy for it. Because it's time for us, for example. Oh, here we are in 2020, and we're still fighting, as you say, these same old issues over and over and over again. Enough is enough.
And you know what, Bishop, I don't even care anymore. Kick me out the church, do whatever you're going to do. But this is crazy how we have coddled sin for so long.
Yeah.
And systemic within the church. And we'll kick somebody out for having a baby out of wedlock, but won't kick somebody out for being a racist.
Oh, mercy, mercy.
And both of the, and I know that will keep you out of heaven. I mean, there's not a segregated heaven, but I don't understand why the institutional church coddles racism, will not deal with racism, knowing it exists in the church, because the church has continued to follow the lead of the world. We look at slavery, and we had to have our founders, and they wanted to shut up our founders, although they were big in the abolitionist movement. Ellen White, James White, John Byington, Joseph Bates have all spoke very clearly. And some point, some of these voices are more alive today with them being dead than the current leadership we have now. And you have people that are more concerned about protecting their positions than saying, you know what? If I lose my job, I'd rather follow the dictates of Christ, knowing that there will be no white supremacy, knowing that there'll be no racism in heaven. Now, as a pastor and educator, Doc Sorton, you went to school with my parents. You've been in this fight for years.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you're not afraid, and you're saying you like this new generation, but Doc, what about your generation?
Well,
what can we do to get them to have the confidence and the flowing of the Holy Ghost to be convicted? Because this is a sin. And if we're trying to get people to heaven, we got to have forgiveness of sin. We've got to become converted and die daily to self.
Well, let me just make my final point. You're covering a number of issues, but what I do want to say is that one of the things I've shared with my young people and young adults and to my church, and I will speak this throughout, that we got to turn our pain into power. We got to vote. We have got to vote. An election is coming up. We have got to vote. Everyone has got to be registered. We've got to vote. There's power in the ballot box. We have got to vote these people out. Because if we don't, then we have another vote. In fact, it's over with. I'm going to another country. If Donald Trump gets reelected, I'm moving to another country. I don't know where. I'm checking my passport now. But we have got to vote. We've got to encourage young, old, in between, black, white, straight, gay, otherwise. We have got to vote.
I agree we got to vote, but we also have to, the church has to be held accountable for speaking truth to power. We can't just start coddling and being silent.
I don't deny that. I get what you're saying. And I've been on this front line for a long time. Sheridan Hall knows, and others of you, I'm sure, have been on the same with this fight. But, I'm fighting within. But I'm talking about nationally, globally. We've got to vote.
I want to fight within the church because we're going to stay in this old ship of Zion, and we're going to fight outside. But something's got to change because we need some Daniels. We need some Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. We need some Esthers. We need that. Zakiya Jarrett, as a woman who can identify with Breonna, tell us, how do you feel? When you heard the verdict, how do you feel? I mean, what were your emotions? just tell us a little bit about what your reaction was with regards to this Breonna Taylor incident.
Yeah, actually, um, I was just saddened. I'm still saddened. I woke up this morning with just a heavy heart, and all of it was like I just had all of my girlfriends on my mind, kinda, you know, because every time we're faced with the reality of one of these situations, I know my mind, kind of shoots to, what if this was my brother? What if this was my best friend? This could have been my father. It could have been someone from my church, someone um, that I knew. And so I don't know. I just had all of my girlfriends on my mind this morning, and I just had this heavy heart. I am the daughter of a retired police lieutenant and police chief. Um, and so I have the utmost respect for law enforcement. I respect police. I support law enforcement. It is just accountability, right, that we're talking about, and that I am um, upset and angry that we continue to not receive, especially in these cases. And my father, as retired law enforcement, feels absolutely the same way. As a Black man first, and as retired law enforcement. And so I just woke up with a heavy heart, and I'm saddened. Um, and I don't know, I felt just burdened all day, you know.
Do you see, we hear a lot about Black men in police, but now we have an incident of a Black young woman that you can identify with. Um, and then now, not only what you happened back in March, but now the verdict. Do you feel safe? How do you feel when you go out? Talk to us about that.
Mhm. Honestly, no. Again, being the daughter of a police officer, my own interactions with law enforcement have all been negative growing up. And so I don't feel safe at all. It hasn't mattered what color the police officer was. It hasn't mattered what neighborhood I was in, whether it was urban, or it just hasn't mattered. Again, I live in Illinois, so it hasn't mattered if I was out in the suburbs or if I was in the city of Chicago. Like, it just hasn't mattered. It hasn't mattered if I was getting pulled over simply for speeding, traffic stop. Somehow I was speeding, even though um, I was in the middle of, you know, two other cars, but I'm the person that gets pulled over for speeding, or just simple stuff. I have been asked as a young lady if I would like to step out of the car to see proof that I was speeding. Absolutely not, sir. Please write me a ticket. Like, no, like that's immediately I felt unsafe. Like, that was an unsafe interaction. I felt threatened when that happened. So yeah, no, I don't feel safe. Unfortunately, all of my interactions with law enforcement have been negative throughout my life. So, and I don't feel any safer as we continue to see that when these types of things happen, there's no accountability.
It's interesting you said that having a father as a professional law enforcement person, and now you're telling us how you feel. And so that accountability piece means something that caught my attention. But just because you have a father who you trust and love in law enforcement, it does not give them blanket immunity to everyone else in law enforcement because of the relationship and respect you have for your father. I found that very interesting. Thank you. Dr. Wallace, Lanice, one of the comments that came out was,
Mhm.
What was she doing? It was reported that she was sleeping. She wasn't flushing drugs down the toilet. It was reported that she was sleeping. You can't eat ice cream. You can't sleep. You can't have a concealed weapon and tell somebody you have a concealed weapon. I mean, you're trying to follow the law. You're trying to stay alive. And, you're a media expert. You're seeing these things happen. You're seeing all these various reports coming in. It's like you got to check the news because you don't even know what's facts anymore. And you can't even trust traditional and mainstream media as relates to facts because even reporters have been busted for inaccurate news. So, how do you make sense of all this madness with regards to the news and the devaluation of Black lives?
Well, when I saw that comment come through in terms of what was she doing, she was being a Black woman in America. That's what she was doing. And that's enough to be killed in this country. Literally just being. We've heard, many of us have heard the Malcolm X quote, the most disrespected, neglected, unprotected person in America is the Black woman. And the irony in that evening, on that evening, in that moment, Mr. Walker, her significant other, was actually trying to protect Breonna. He was trying to honor her. And the system actually failed this couple and this woman. So with that said, it's a long story with the whole communication stuff, but I'm gonna bring it down to, there is a theory called the agenda setting theory. And so this has been going on for a long time, where the media sets the agenda for what we are to believe. And they replay it, repetition, they replay it, they replay it. It's not by accident that when people see the mugshots of a lot of Black men and people of color, Black women, and then, that's replayed over and over again, that not only white people, but some Black people start to question, well, is he a criminal because he has on that hoodie? And these are things that these are racist, gendered, stereotypical images that are constant. They're replayed over and over again. The media is conscious of this because, again, there's theory behind this, supporting this, and nothing is done. And if you don't know that, then you might become one of those people that just runs on that. You're part of that train. So that is a part of a massive problem, and it's been going on from the beginning of time. And I'm not saying that it's all members of the media that have this private agenda, but it's a large majority of it.
So who checks the media? I mean, you got the systemic racism problem. You got the reporting. That's the issue. You have the church that's not, speaking truth to power. So you have all of this various types of stuff beating up people at one time. Then you have people who's like, I don't want you to talk about racism. I don't, because it's politics. Or I don't want you to deal with this. Let's just not talk about it. Let's just ignore it. I mean, it's so many mixed messages, so many mixed signals.
Yeah.
What do you do, Doc? I mean, I'm having information overload. What do you do?
Well, that also speaks to gatekeeping and who has the powers, who has the power to put on these programs, who owns the media, who are these people, right? And so when you think about media conglomerates, and it's a whole thing with that too, that everything you read, you see, you hear, there's like 8 people that own all of this, all those channels that you have on your cable. It's like 8 companies. So if they don't believe that something should be shown, then they don't play it. And so there's that. It's so many layers to this, and who checks them? No one, because when you own it, you can do whatever you want. And so that's why when we've been hearing so much about Black ownership and, if we owned our own media outlets and if we did this and we did that, then you can share your own stories. You can, broadcast your own images, positive images. And so that's the goal. That is the goal. And we're seeing more and more of that. So it's not like it doesn't exist wholly. It does exist, and we're seeing more and more of it. But we need to see more of it because we already know that when we don't control the narrative is going to be out there and is going to be controlled. So it's a matter of who is sharing our stories and who is sharing what our day to day, and what angle, what perspective, what lens is that being shot from.
All right, Brother Isaiah Delamar. Oh, we lost him. Thank you so much, Dr. Wallace, for that. Um, I really wanted to go to Brother Isaiah, then go to Pastor Hall. Pastor Hall, in addition to being a pastor, also works with young people. So, Attorney Delamar, tell us why the outcome. We announced the settlement a couple of days ago. Then they announced the charge. So, tell us from a legal standpoint what's going on here, and then after you talk to us from the legal standpoint, tell us what we can do about qualified immunity and some of these other laws that need to change, and how that can make a difference from a legal standpoint.
Sure, thank you. So I want to say greetings to my esteemed panelists, and I want to say to my good brother, Dr. Woods, thank you for extending this opportunity to speak to you all tonight. And I'm coming to you from a professional standpoint, so it's going to be somewhat clinical, but my heart, just like everyone else, was saddened, not only that you have the loss of life, but also what I personally think of the media, like my sister said, playing on the emotions, but from a different standpoint. So when I look at the law, so there's an article that I wrote back in October 2017, and I can email it to any of the listening audience, and I will give my email address at the end. I was asked to do this article right around the time when Orlando Castile and Gardner, all of these brothers and sisters were being killed, Sandra Bland. And so I looked at the law and why we had this situation. And I hosted several meetings at the Berean Church in Atlanta and spoke around the country and at the invitation of Brother Woods. And so I did research, and there's a U.S. Supreme Court case. I just want to read a quick excerpt of this, and then I want to go into a news article that was written about the facts of the case, because it's always all about the facts. So the U.S. Supreme Court case that allows the police officers to get away with what they're doing is called Tennessee versus Gardner. Tennessee versus Gardner, Garner. And of course, I'm having some technical difficulties now trying to pull up my article. And the case citation is 471 US 1, and it's a 1985 case. Tennessee versus Gardner. In a nutshell, that case says that whenever an officer reasonably believes that their life is in danger or the lives of the community is in danger, they have the lawful right to use deadly force to deal with that threat. So whenever you'll see that whenever there's an incident, the officer is always going to try to frame whatever encounter is that their life was in danger. So in this case, whenever you have the discharge of arms, and Breonna Taylor's boyfriend was the first one who fired the firearms, they're going to say, my life was in danger, because that's obviously a deadly weapon. And then so they have the legal or lawful authority to now use deadly force. And unfortunately, that happened. So this article, if you want to read it, is called In Taylor Case, Limits of Law Overcomes Calls for Justice. And it's an AP article, and it has that attorney general. So I just want to read an excerpt that I think is relevant, so you all will be able to look at it from a legal lens and not so much the emotion. So it says here, the officers entered the home as a part of an investigation into a suspect who lived across town. No drugs were found at Taylor's home. Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, was with her at the apartment and fired a shot at Louisville Police Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly after the door was broken. So right there, so let me just kind of back up. The reason why they went to Breonna Taylor's house was that Breonna's ex-boyfriend apparently was involved in some kind of drug deal, and he used her address. And so that's what gave them probable cause when they obviously sought that no-knock warrant. And that's in legal speak under the Fourth Amendment is probable cause, which gives them the right to now enter into her property. And obviously, initially, they had that no-knock warrant. And from what I understand from reading different accounts, that there was a change, and in which case they're claiming that they actually did announce that they were police officers. So here it is. They go to the apartment, they have probable cause, and then they're met with fire from her boyfriend. And put yourself in his perspective. He doesn't know. It's dark, and somebody's coming in, and you see guns. Your immediate instinct is self-preservation, self-protection. You're going to fire, and hence the exchange. So it says Walker said that he fired because he feared that he was being robbed or that it might be an ex-boyfriend of Taylor's trying to get in. Mattingly was struck in the leg and returned fire along with other officers who were outside the apartment. But the officers who opened fire on Taylor were determined by prosecutors to be justified in using force because they acted in self-defense. The officer who shot into the neighbor's apartment was the one who was being charged with the felony, and that's Brett Hankerson. And so Ben Crump said this: the rallying cries that have been echoing throughout the nation have been once again ignored by a justice system that claims to serve people, right? And then he says this, and I concentrate on this: but when a justice system only acts in the best interest of the most privileged and the whitest amongst us, it has failed. And it says, from the legal analysis, the outcome came as no surprise to legal experts who said murder charges would never stand up in court because the officers were fired at first. Police are shielded by laws and long-standing court rulings, giving them wide latitude to use deadly force to protect themselves or others. It's been rare to charge police with crimes in the death of civilians, and winning a conviction is even harder. Quote, you can't get justice from a tragedy. What we have is a series of events that culminated in the use of self-defense, both by Taylor's boyfriend and the officer, said Jan Wardell, a Louisville defense attorney. Just because Breonna was caught in the middle of that, she was the victim of a shooting, doesn't mean that either one of those parties engaged in criminal activity, he said. The fact that the officers were not only fired upon first, but had a warrant allowing them to legally enter the apartment would have provided them with a powerful defense, legal expert says. Prosecutors will likely face even charges or challenges in securing a conviction against Hankerson for wanton endangerment. When an officer is a criminal defendant in one of these cases, and when they take the witness stand, it seems that juries are very reluctant to second guess the split-second life or death decisions of police officers in potentially violent encounters. Philip Stanton, a former police officer and criminologist at Bowling Green, said. So when you look at this from a legal standpoint and a factual standpoint, sadly, I would say that justice was served. And the fact that Louisville, on the civil side, I think that they did what was right. Legally, they probably could have defended themselves. But I thought that sometimes we advise our clients, even though legally you might have a defense, you try to do what is right because it's right. So I think that it was right that they settled and they reached a civil settlement. And now when you talk about qualified immunity, that's a statutory acting under the color of law. So that is what gives police officers immunity from personal prosecution and civil penalties when they are acting at in behest of the sovereign or their principal or the master in this case, which is the police department. As long as they are not acting with criminal intent, they get what is known as legal protection or qualified immunity. I know that there is, a move toward stripping that away. I don't know politically how viable that is going to be, but that is one way to potentially remedy these situations. But I don't know how fruitful those activities will be ultimately politically, especially in this environment.
Thank you so much. Appreciate those insights. We might not like what we've heard, but what they told me when I've dealt with prosecutors in the past, this is the law. We can't change the law. This is the law. Pastor Sherry Hall, in addition to being a pastor, you're an educator. You work with students like Breonna. You have seen students like Breonna who have matriculated through your halls of learning. Talk to us about it from an educator standpoint that has the heart of a pastor. We've heard the legalese, we've heard the boots on the ground, we've heard it from a Breonna Taylor, that could have been Zakiya Jarrett. We've heard it from the media standpoint. Kind of wrap this thing together and talk to us about that.
Can you hear me?
Now, yes, thank you.
Yes, I was very saddened by the verdict because when I look at the life of Breonna Taylor, it was very personal for me because I have the opportunity to serve adults between the ages of 17 and 26. And what I do in my profession is I facilitate the GED and the high school diploma program for over 18 years. And when the young women and men come to me, they come to me disenfranchised, disadvantaged. The women have been abused, misused. They've been marginalized. Some of them are homeless. They've been raped. They have low self-esteem. They have all of these layers of challenges and obstacles, but yet they come every day to get their GEDs and their high school diplomas. And when I think about the life of Breonna Taylor, she was 26 years of age. She got her GED. She was an EMT, a first responder. She, was determined. She was disciplined. She set goals. And for her life to be just snuffed out like that was a tragedy. And I felt like it was an indictment not only on our justice system, but an indictment on the right to live in your own home and be safe, and also an indictment on our Blackness. Because this systemic racism, this is not something that just started. Dr. Thornton talked about the settlement, that the family got $12 million. And I was having a discussion with someone today where a white woman was killed by a Black police officer. The Black police officer went to jail and the family got $55 million. And we know that the money is not really what it's about because you cannot put a value, a dollar amount on somebody's life. But it's this perpetuation of the systemic racism that Black lives don't matter. And we see it across the board on so many levels and how it's perpetuated in our society, even to the point where we have a president who said today, who applauded the attorney general and said, oh, he's going to be a star. And he didn't even have enough compassion in his heart to mention Breonna Taylor's name. Couldn't even say her name, couldn't even express, condolences to the family, because his leadership is so grossly flawed. And so it's tragic that this is the leadership of what we have in our country today, which is adding to the divisiveness in our country, which is adding to all of the hostility and anger in our country. And so, I felt really, really, really sorrowful about Breonna because she was a rising star. You know, she was not somebody whose life should have, nobody's life should have been taken, but this is a young lady who was saving lives, who were going to where, you know, the action was, who was sacrificing her own life. Even in this pandemic, this COVID-19, you know, environment we find ourselves in. So it's very, very tragic, you know. And just to do a sidebar about the church, you know, we talk about the racism in the church. We talk about, you know, leaders in the church not being able to speak truth to power, you know, but it's not just the racism, it's the sexism, you know. And you all don't have time to hear my story because I could share a lot with you about the whole sexism thing. But we have to rise up. We have to speak truth to power. We can no longer be afraid. We have to be held accountable, and we have to hold one another accountable in these last days, because it's not going to get any better. And so this thing with Breonna Taylor, I mean, it's just perpetuated. Ahmaud Arbery, George, it just goes on. Floyd, it just goes on and on and on. And then we sit back and we have these discussions, but we need to do something. You know, and the protesting is good, but we need policies changed. We need legislation change. We need to address the economic issue, the disparity in our country, you know, between blacks and whites. And it's just something I'm outraged about it, you know, because I feel so frustrated, because I feel helpless. And I know that we talk a lot about what we need to do. You know, we have black on black crime. You know, every time I turn on the news, you know, young guys are getting killed in Philadelphia, you know, from their own people. And so these are some of the issues that we have to address, because we're really out of control right now in our nation, you know. And I pray, you know, for our nation every day. But our young people, they need us. They need to see role models. They need to see examples of what it is to live a righteous life, to make good decisions, you know, because it really impacts all of us. When one of us is hurting, all of us is hurting, you know. So we got to really come together and try to make a difference and effect change in a positive way, where we can actually see policies and legislation being impacted.
You know, it's almost 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock Central. That was excellent. You know, we always, you know, we talk about coming together, and it becomes a vent show where we all vent and say our piece, and we try to go rah, make our points. But I want you to, you know, everyone's like, okay, what's my takeaway? Mm-hmm. What's one thing that you could challenge the audience that you're going to also challenge yourself to do? In other words, I'm seeking to do this. And, you know, I know we spent a lot of time, you know, tracing the history of systemic racism in the church. And, you know, it's frustrating, it's exhausting. And you would think the church in 2020 would wake up and do something, and it's not happening. And I think sometimes I spent too much of my time frustrated at the lack of the progress of the institutional church in eradicating racism, which is a sin that people need to repent. And we're not doing it. You know, we've had it during the slavery. We've had it during the civil rights era. The church wasn't on board. Now the Black Lives Movement. And all we're saying, the message, you know, we want to throw, well, we don't like the Black Lives Organization. We don't like this or we don't like that. But the message in affirming Black Lives Matter too, not through the exclusion of others, but being included of others, is a positive message. And how you can't say that, knowing biblically that we're created in the image and likeness of God, is beyond me. How you can say that that's political, civil rights is political, is beyond me, when God says he sides with the oppressed. So there's something wrong biblically there.
Yeah.
In regards to that. And I just want to stop focusing on the institutional church, knowing our history is not well, and there's the intestinal fortitude, Bishop Thornton, it's just not there. So we can beat up, and it's not going to change anything, because people don't want to listen and they're not going to do it. But what I can do, and what I will do, in addition to voting, as we talked about earlier, is we need to start affirming the allies in our church. I've seen folks who have come on this show where they have lost friends. These are Caucasian brothers and sisters who have lost friends because they have taken a stand in saying that they affirm that Black Lives Matter too. I've seen them crying in tears, how friends have turned on them in the church of the living God because they're speaking up for Black lives. I've seen pastors being vilified outside of the church and inside of the church some even by their own conference administration, because they believe that Black Lives Matter. Whether they put up a sign on the church board, if you see it, vilify. I had to call that brother and affirm him. And we got to do more of that with our allies. Let's call and affirm. I say, you know what? I'm going to call and affirm. I'm going to say thank you, because guess what? That's not the norm for someone to come out on their own and say, you know what? Black Lives Matter too. And as a pastor, you know, we want to do better. As a pastor, I'm going to preach this from my pulpit. As a pastor, I'm going to affirm it. And we've had some brothers, you know, that have done that, which is contrary to their organization, but they have done that. And they have rolled their eyes and doing things. And pastors are right now trying to decide whether they should follow God or the dictates of men. And that's a tough place to be in as a pastor, when you're trying to respect your leadership, knowing that they're not godly in nature, because they're embracing, they're coddling systemic racism, and they know it's wrong, and they know it's not godly, but yet they're doing it anyway. And so my charge to me, as well as to everyone else, is let's affirm our allies who do not look like us and who are speaking truth to power from their pulpits, having this conversation. Make sure that they do not feel alone, because in this life, folks, if we don't affirm them, we will never have the change that we're seeking to have, because we can't do it by ourselves.
Amen.
The human race, the race that God has created in his image and in his likeness, we need to encourage and affirm one another as Christians. And if our brothers and sisters who look differently in us have the courage to do it, I invite you in the area that you live in to please affirm them and support them, so that they never have to feel that they're alone, or they're never marginalized for being quote unquote Black lovers versus the racial epithet lovers that they're saying are behind their back. Never, ever, ever let them feel that they're alone. And let's thank God and praise for them. And last but not least, please register to vote. Wherever you are, vote. Go to the website, vote411.org. Vote411.org. Wherever you are in the country, you can get nonpartisan information about your candidates, and vote the whole ballot. Don't just vote for president and the vice president and the senator and the U.S. rep. Vote for those prosecutors, because that prosecutor lives in your community, and ask them where they stand on qualified immunity. Ask them where they stand on criminal justice reform. But vote, and go to vote411.org. And first and foremost, please make sure you're registered to vote. Tuesday was National Voter Registration Day. Please, 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 if you're 18 or over, please make sure you're registered to vote. And if you go to vote411.org, it will give you the information to walk you through to let you know whether or not you are registered to vote. That's the challenge that I'm giving to myself, but also challenging others, that I'm going to affirm our allies, and I'm going to get people to vote. Bishop,
Doc, one of the things I want to do is to continue to develop and bring about the best version of myself, so that I can be an example to others. And I want to be like what Lizzie will say, I want to be good as hell. And I want to remain that way. No matter what happens, I feel good as hell.
Amen.
Let the church say amen.
I'm just going to continue to speak our truth. You know, sometimes young adults may feel like we're in a space, you know, at work or wherever we may be. There may not always be very many people that look like us where we are. But I want to challenge them to speak our truth in an effort to keep an open dialogue and educate the people that are around us.
Thank you for that. Pastor Sherry Hall.
Yes, I would encourage us to pray But after we finish praying, get up off your knees and go to work. You know, that's what Jesus did. He was an excellent example. He was a social justice leader. You know, so we want to be radical, but we want to be intelligent. We want to have compassion, but we want to do what Jesus did.
Isaiah Delamar, Esquire.
Can you hear me? As I outlined in that article, we need to vote. I thought you did an eloquent job of mentioning. A lot of times we forget that those prosecutors have tremendous discretion. And the other reason why you want to vote is because now you can become a part of the jury pool, right? And there's other things that we can work on where you know your rights when you deal with the police officer. So the ACLU has an insert that you can put in your wallet. Again, I'm going to give you my email address. Anybody who wants that article, and I can send you some stuff of how you assert your rights, how you can get your records expunged. And one of the things that to me, what our community needs to focus in on, I get the whole marching. I personally don't believe in it. We marched a few years ago and we're at the same position. But what LeBron James is doing down in Florida, where he is trying to raise money to have those felons who don't have the money so that they can register to vote, to me, that's a much better use of our time and our resource, because that's going to make a difference. We know that Florida is going to be tight and every vote will count. So my email address is isaiah.delemar@gmail.com. Again, isaiah.delemar, and I will send you those articles in the future.
Thank you so much. Dr. Wallace.
Okay. I just would leave off with remembering that being pro-Black is not being anti-white, and to promote, uplift, empower Black businesses, and remember that we and only we can control our narratives. So being our best representatives at all time, representing Jesus Christ, and just doing, like Pastor Sherry said, doing the work, handling our business.
Dr. Wallace, we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Listen, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get it kicked off with, if you know some allies, whether they're Black, white, Asian, I don't care what color they are, and they have a good story, I want to be a part of affirming them and talking about their struggles, because we want to highlight the good things. We've been talking about some of the negative things that haven't happened in the church, and you know what? It is what it is. But let's highlight the positive. If you know someone that has been an ally in this struggle, have them email me at PARL@LRCSDA.com. PARL@LRCSDA.com. I want to hear their stories. I want to showcase their stories. And more importantly, I want people who look like me to know that there are people out there who feel our pain, who know our pain, and have shared the same frustrations with the church that we have. But guess what? They've made a decision. Come what may, I'm going to follow the dictates of God versus the pleasures of men. And for that, we say, glory, hallelujah. Blessed be the rock of Jesus Christ, because he is our salvation. He is our deliverer. And most importantly, he's coming back to take us all home to a universal heaven. Not a segregated heaven, not one full of systemic oppression, but a heaven where the only system is agape, unconditional love. To my panelists, thank you once again for coming on. We're going to debrief after the show. Bishop Thornton from the magazine Seventh-day Adventist Church, Bishop G.E. Thornton, thank you for being with us today. The attorney, the great Isaiah Delamar, all the way from ATL. Thank you for giving us the law and what that meant, especially the reference to Tennessee versus Gardner, so we understand what happened with the Breonna Taylor case. to my colleague and partner in ministry from the Great Lake Region Conference, the one who's keeping our youth and young adult program on fire, Zakia Jarrett. Thank you for being transparent and authentic today. Two, the doctor, my new best friend, Dr. Estlanise Wallace. Dr. Wallace, thank you so much for sharing the media, sharing what's going on with the media, and how the only thing you can really trust in this life is Jesus Christ. When it all comes down to it, you can't trust anybody else but Jesus. He is the way, the truth, and the light. And to my sister, all the way from North Philly, Pastor Sherry Hall, thanks for keeping it real. All of y'all kept it real. Yeah. Being pro-Black doesn't mean you're anti-white. Did you hear that? So let's make sure we don't lose who we are. Amen. So we can try to accommodate who they are and still cry out about systemic oppression and racism. Pastor Sherry Hall, thanks for speaking truth to power. Thanks for sharing the story of an educator and making a difference. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is PARL today with your host, Edward Woods III. We want to go to the screen and just highlight something that is taking place starting tomorrow. Highlight something that is taking place starting tomorrow is our Everyone Counts, Everyone Matters Conscience and Justice virtual convention. We start tomorrow at 7:00 p.m. and our topic is discipleship and racism. Can they coexist? Discipleship and racism, can they coexist? We're featuring Dr. Willie Hucks, Pastor Jose Cortez Jr., Dr. Olive Hemmings, and Dr. Zach Plantock. You want to be a part of this discussion. Can discipleship and racism coexist? Taking place at 7 to 8:30. Following that, we will hear from our own North American Division President, Dr. G. Alex Bryant, will bring the word tomorrow, following that at 8:30. After we have the discipleship and racism coexist panel, and we hear from Dr. Bryant, we'll have the Lucille Byard Symposium, the intersection of mental health and social justice, an exploratory panel with Dr. Marissa Leslie, Dr. Jennifer Noble, Dr. Anandi, and Dr. Marilyn Link. You're going to want to be a part of that. Friday service is being sponsored by the, let me go back to it so I don't forget. Friday service is being sponsored by the North American Division Ministerial Department, the North American Division Ministerial Department, and the Office for Regional Conference Ministry. And Sabbath morning is being sponsored by Adventist Healthcare. You're going to want to hear this girl magic, this sister power tomorrow, the intersection of mental health on Saturday, at 11 a.m. to 12:15. All times are Eastern. Then Saturday evening, we're going to have one called Faith and Community at 6:15 p.m. to 7:45. You're going to want to be a part of that discussion. And then one prior to that at 4:30, we're going to come back and start at 4:30. We got the mic. Social justice through the lens of millennials and Generation Z, featuring Claudia Allen, Charles Winston Goodman, Dr. Tiffany Llewellyn, Pastor Corey Johnson, attorney Michael Nixon, and Priscilla Josiah. It will be co-hosted by Carmela Monk Crawford and Megan Woods. We got the mic. Social justice through the lens of millennials and Generation Z at 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. Followed by that is Faith Community. And then after that, we will hear from Pastor Danielle Brown of the Cathedral International Church. Pastor of Church Life will close us out. Pastor Carlton P. Bird, Dr. Carlton P. Bird, senior pastor of the Oakwood University Church, and the speaker director of Breath of Life will provide the message. It will be a simulcast with the Oakwood University Church. So please, please, please tune in for our Sabbath Divine Worship, where our very own Dr. Carlton P. Bird will be the speaker on Sabbath. And then right after the mental health panel, we'll hear from Lincoln Steed, who will talk about religious persecution around the world. We have an all-star lineup, and we want to encourage you to be a part of that, because we know that everyone counts, everyone matters, simply because they're created in the image and likeness of God. To register for free, go to cjcouncil.org, cjcouncil.org, and register for free and be a part of this dynamic, interactive, and engaging discussion. Everyone counts, everyone matters. Our theme came because we're all created in the image and likeness of God. But for those of you, as it relates to the census, make sure you're counted. It's not over yet. It's still not too late to fill out the census form, to make sure that you are counted in filling out the census form. And then everyone counts, everyone matters. Just reminding you, your vote matters. God bless you and good night. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 7 o'clock p.m. Thank you so much.